hopefully we are all here.
Hello.
Woo, we did it.
Look at these exciting times.
We did it.
Amazing. Amanda, is this our most attended webinar ever?
This is, like, by far.
Incredible.
So friends, there are over 2,200 of you.
Wow.
It's like close to 2,300.
Incredible.
Actually.
Steve, this means no pressure, but if you say the wrong thing, if you say the
a
wrong
lot
thing,
of people know. Yes, right.
Lots of people are going to post to their LinkedIn and their Mastodon and their Instagram and not Twitter because no one uses that anymore. And they're going to say, Steve told us this wrong thing on a webinar.
Oh, yes, I'm going to get it from all angles. Good.
Yeah.
Yes.
The bar is extremely high. That's not actually true. It's going to be chill as heck because the SparkToro crowd is just awesome, as you can tell.
Totally.
All right, friends, I'm gonna give you the quick rundown with Amanda here. So, welcome to Goldcast, which we've been using for a couple of webinars now. You can see that there's a chat on the right-hand side of your interface. I think it should be that direction from me.
I'm seeing the other.
That's the other way.
It's that way. Just look that way. Look, the fish background was not my choice, okay? I'm just going to point that out. It's not like because my last name is Fishkin or, it would be like Amanda having like a Christmas background. It'd just be weird.
I should do that.
We moved into a new house, and this is what's back there. So you can use the public chat. We encourage that. We would love to hear from you, your messages, where you're from, where you're joining us from. Obviously, when Steve gets going, please, by all means, jump in the chat about your experiences with GA and your analytics problems and all that kind of stuff. You can also use, if you would like, the Q&A. You'll see a little tab for Q&A. You can click over there and you can ask a question right in there. And at the end of Steve's formal presentation, Amanda's going to manage that and ask Steve your questions and make sure that gets through. If for any reason you need to leave during the webinar or you have friends who want to watch this, the webinar is being recorded. You will be able to get the recording right afterward. Amanda, do we send an email?
We do. So the recording will be available as soon as this is done. So it'll be on this page. But I also send a follow-up email that has the slides. And this time we'll have additional resources from Steve. So it'll actually be an email that you'd probably want to save in your inbox.
Yeah, absolutely. I have one quick question for everyone. If you feel like using the chat and answering, I'm very curious about whether what folks' roles are in their organizations. Are you an analyst, an analytics specialist? Are you a digital marketer? Are you a creative, a manager, a founder? I'm quite curious about this, mostly because I'm just trying to, understand all the folks who want to understand GA, and I think that might be helpful for Steve as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Variety.
Yeah, quite a variety of folks, and this is one of those things where I think measurement and reporting is important to such a wide group of people. Mm-hmm. And so, Steve, we're honored and touched that you agreed to do this with us, and quite excited. I also really appreciate how generous you've been with your knowledge. Whenever I copy you in on Twitter or on an email, and you're just helping folks out. For anyone who doesn't know, Steve also helped us with our dark social research just about a month and a half ago, which obviously did very well, brought a lot of attention to this problem of dark social. And that was Steve partnering with us and helping make that real. So again, appreciate you, sir.
Yeah,
and with
that was a fun project.
Amanda, I'm going to let you take it away and kick us off.
Yeah, awesome. So I'm dropping the link to the dark social study we did. Yeah, so it is there at the bottom of the screen. It's our little ticker. I am curious about it because I think we did want to kick off with a couple quick questions about that research. Something I want to ask both of you is, did you have any hypotheses going into this research? And was there anything you thought that was actually proven wrong?
The one thing for me was I because I saw some traffic from Mastodon in our Google Analytics, I thought that Mastodon was actually getting reported, but turns out what happens is every individual server gets to choose whether they want to provide attribution, and only one server did, and apparently someone shared a link to us that did well there. And so that was what got what looked like Mastodon traffic. But of course, I think what this turns out to mean is we're probably getting a lot of traffic from Mastodon. It's quite popular. And I think this is probably what's driving a lot of digital marketers to think Mastodon is dead, is that almost every instance on Mastodon does not pass referral data. So it all looks like direct. Whereas Twitter is getting perfectly reported. I don't think we saw a single miss, right, Steve?
No,
from Twitter?
yeah, it was 100%. Yep.
Yeah. So there you go. That's, I think, one of the frustrations around these networks that are more privacy centric is that they don't appear to be as powerful. And so I think probably marketers are not investing in them. Teams aren't investing in them. So that was a surprise / frustration / interesting thing for me.
Yeah, I came from a different angle because I just saw Rand's post on LinkedIn asking the question. I was like, I haven't thought about it that much. Like, it's more, I know that there's gaps, but I didn't think about it from an individual platform and how did each platform deal with it, or where are we missing data? So it was a lot of fun to kind of figure that out and put some rules in place to identify what platforms have issues and where they're purposely blocking, or just by the nature of, cookies being blocked or ad blocker, all that stuff, like everything else that happens on the web, how it's getting blocked. So it was a very interesting process to go through and kind of eye-opening to get some more specifics, not just this, it's just, we're missing data, right? It was nice to see details.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Maybe a dumb question, but were you able to analyze all this in GA4, or will you?
Yeah. So set up old GA and GA4 as well, and they were really similar. They tracked very similarly. No differences there. So it wasn't like one platform. The old or new was kind of doing it differently. So yeah, that was good to test as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sorry, I want to mention something in the chat. Our friend Chris Ferris says, for a minute, I thought Steve was Golden State Warriors coach Steve Kerr. Do you get that a lot? I totally see it.
I don't even know who that is.
Well, a lot of us see it, and it's awesome.
Great. It's good. I'm glad to hear it. I'll have to look him up after this. That'll be nice. Yeah.
Amazing.
Okay, so maybe in the spirit of that, when I just asked, did you check it in GA4? I said, this is kind of a dumb question. That's my role for today, friends. So I will be the one asking the dumb questions, or the questions that I fear are dumb, because I'm not the expert.
Or that everybody else has, right? And I had before I really started digging into this. Like, we're all kind of in the same place, right?
Oh my God, is that Steve Kerr? He looks exactly like you.
I don't know. Am I that old though? Oh, hold on. How old is he?
Well,
he looks a little older than you.
He does look older, yeah.
Yes,
but if you had an older twin,
related. Yes.
That's remarkable. And you live in Denver.
Yes.
All right. Well, then probably not you. Okay, I'm gonna let Steve kick it off. Steve, will you tell folks what you do for a living and how you managed to get into GA stuff?
Yeah, my background's in digital marketing, right? So I got into digital marketing years ago, and kind of one thing led to the next. And Google Analytics has always been a part of that, and it's always been data driven. I've always loved that. Focused a lot in the e-commerce space, and even that is even deeper in analytics. Like, you're constantly looking at the data and daily plans and revenue and all that stuff. And so it's always been something that's driven me. And then the last 4 or 5 years really started focusing more in the analytics space and getting more and more into that. And then once GA4 got announced and that Google's pushing on that, just kept going deeper and deeper in that. So the last year and a half or so, that's kind of been my life, just focused on GA4 and learning as much as I can about it, helping people with migrations, training, all that stuff. So it's kind of just evolved into this thing and kind of has taken over my life at this point, since it's been so prevalent. But it's been fun. It's nice because it kind of shakes things up a little bit, something new in this space. So
Yeah, that is wonderful.
Cool.
Well, I mean, you got to do something when, the Warriors aren't playing, right?
Right. That's right. It's the off season. I don't know. We're off season, I'm sure.
Who would have
Fantastic.
thought?
All right. You want to take us away, sir?
Yeah. So I think what we have planned for today is so we'll go through some of the terminology or the new terms of GA4. We'll also talk through the sort of black and white stuff, like what you cannot do now in GA4 that you used to do in UA. And then we're going to go through a bunch of marketing use cases. Like I think we have like 4 or so, like what we thought were the most salient, most common marketing use cases to help everybody get started. And so to get started, I did have an opening question for us. Well, for Steve. Is there a way we can talk through the changes on a sort of high or holistic level? So, for instance, so far, I'm thinking about GA4 as overall trying to be more engagement focused. And through that lens, that might inform a lot of the changes. So, I guess my question to you is, what are some of the heuristics for how we can think about GA4 is materially different from universal analytics?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing is just it's foundationally different, right? But I think GA4 has been more focused on engagement, on events, just from the beginning. It actually kind of started as tracking apps, right? As Firebase kind of turned to GA4, which is different analytics, set. But basically, out of the box, old GA, Universal Analytics, would only track page views. That's the only thing we track unless you set up custom events and tracked other things. GA4, when you first set it up, it'll track things like page scrolls, or if you download files, or you watch a embedded YouTube video, like it already has some of those events or engagement metrics built in. And then it also does a much better job of tracking engagement. We'll talk a little bit about this a little bit more in depth, but just engagement time and bounce rates are different in there because GA4 does a better job of tracking there. So that I think there is a kind of more of a fundamental thought around how users are interacting. If you think about old GA, it's been around for since 2005 or something, right? So the web's very different now. Apps are prevalent, that type of thing. So it definitely is a more foundational change for sure.
Cool. Okay. So with that, I think we can get into some of the terms here. All right. So I figure everyone can see the screen. Today, our crash course in GA4, a safe space where there are no stupid questions. We're going to start off with some new terms to know. So as Steve said, there's an overall key focus on engagement and events, and he'll talk through in more detail here. First, we'll start with sessions, right? So sessions are visits to your site. They time out after 30 minutes of inactivity, and they can contain multiple traffic sources, which is unlike the old GA.
Yeah. And probably the two biggest differences, right? So sessions, they're visits to your site. That's like the fundamental. That's no different. They do time out after 30 minutes. That's no different either. So if someone comes to your site, they maybe they get distracted, they leave the tab open, they leave after 30 minutes of inactivity, the session will end. If they come back, a new session starts. So that's no different than what it was before. One of the bigger differences is that the source of traffic, if it changes mid-session, in old GA, it used to start a brand new session over. And as an example of that, like if you have a B2B site and you have a place where someone can log in, maybe they log in through Google, right? So they do the Google authentication and they come back, and SparkToro does that, right? You can log into your account that way. So if you originally come from paid search and you come to SparkToro and then you go log in, it actually takes you to Google and then back to SparkToro after you're done logging in. And so in old GA, it would track 2 sessions there, because now the source of the traffic has changed. It's now coming from Google, not google.com's searching, but from the authentication. It comes back to the site, and then the session breaks, and then you have 2 new sessions. So in GA4, it's smarter, and it actually tracks both of those sources. but keeps the session alive. So you may see fewer sessions in GA4 because of that. It's one of the reasons.
Oh, so you might see more traffic sources, but fewer sessions?
You could see the same amount of traffic sources because it's still tracking both of those, but in the same session, the multiple sources will not break the session. So the session count would could be lower in GA4 than it was in old GA.
Okay. All right. I think we'll move on to the next slide.
Yep. Yeah.
All right. Now, engage sessions, right? So these last longer than 10 seconds, or they include 2 or more page views, or have a scroll to the bottom of the page, or have at least 1 conversion.
Yeah. And so this one's a big difference from old GA. So engaged sessions is new. That's a new metric. And as I was saying before, GA4 does a better job of tracking how long someone's on a site. So it kind of has like a beacon that it tracks and says, all right, someone's been on this site for now 10 seconds. And so now they're considered engaged. Before there wasn't even engagement, wasn't even a thing. We think more about bouncing and bounce rate from before. So yeah, if they're on the site more than 10 seconds, they view 2 or more pages, which that's kind of similar to old GA in a sense, or they scroll to the bottom or have a conversion. So any of those things happen, it's engaged. So when you're in GA4 and you see that metric, that's what it's counting.
Okay, cool. Now, users versus total users. So users only includes users that had an engaged session. So total users will be a closer match to old GA.
Yeah, this one's kind of confusing, right? Because the same terminology is being used, users and users. So in Universal Analytics, we had users, and that was just tries to track an individual, right? It's based on the browser and the computer they're on, but you have your user. And in G4, it's still labeled as users, but in fact, it's active users. So they have to have had an engaged session. If they didn't have an engaged session during that time, they're not even counted in that user count. So again, if you're trying to do a comparison between old GA and GA4, you're going to see differences there if you're using that users metric, which is prevalent across all the reports. So if you really want to do a true comparison, if you're trying to say, how do these line up? Am I tracking kind of similarly? You're going to need to use the total users metric, not the users metric. So that's a pretty big difference and cause for confusion for folks.
Clear as mud. Got it.
Yes.
Not you. I mean,
it is riddled. The GA4 is riddled with these little puzzles that we have to figure out. So yes, that's great.
Okay, we'll go next slide. Okay, we're going to kind of try to go through these real quickly-ish because we have more to get through. All right, average engagement time. This replaces the average time on site metric from old GA, but GA4 does a better job in tracking engagement time. Bounce sessions used to have a 0-second time on site, bringing down the average in old GA.
Right. So because as I was talking about, GA4 has a better sense of how long someone's been on the site. So in old GA, someone comes to the site, they only look at one page, and then they could sit on your homepage for 15 minutes and then leave. And Google Analytics had no idea they were on there for 15 minutes. They only knew they're on there for actually 0 seconds. That's a 0-second time on site if they bounce. And so if you have, 15, 20, 30% bounce rate, that could really decrease your time on site because you have a lot of sessions that have 0-second average or time on site. So that'll bring down your average. GA4 does a better job of this. So it will track your average time on site better, and your engagement time will actually be higher because you don't have that average bringing it down, or the 0-second time on site bringing it down.
Okay. All right. Now, engagement rate, number of engaged sessions divided by the total number of sessions. So as an example, if you had 100 sessions and 72 of them were engaged, your engagement rate would be 72%. And now bounce rate is the inverse of engagement rate.
Yeah. Yeah, so if we think back on the engagement rate is they're on for more than 10 seconds, they viewed more than 2 pages, they scrolled, or they had a conversion. So that's your engagement, the number of engagements. So it's actually, Google didn't even have bounce rate for a while. They're kind of pushing back that they don't want to include bounce rate in it. They finally did. And all it is just the inverse of engagement rate. So if you have a 72% engagement rate, you've got a 28% bounce rate. So engagement rate is not actually, or bounce rate's not actually on the reports by default. If you want to see it, you need to add it as a custom or as a metric that you add to your saved reports.
Cool. And I think engagement time is going to be really helpful. All right, next one. Attribution. So this one has been kind of confusing, in part because they've changed this a couple times in GA4 before this official rollout. So attribution is how you choose to give credit to the various channels that drive conversions on your site. You can choose between data-driven, which is Google's recommendation, and last click, but data-driven is only used in minimal reports.
Yeah, and so this is actually something I learned last week. So there's the part about where data-driven is showing up in the reports, but last click and data-driven. So in last click, if you consider somebody coming to your site, and I've got an example here, right? So let's say they first hit your site from display, and they come back a week later, social, and they come back through paid search, and then they come back on email, and they finally check out. They convert in whatever that is on your site. Then in last click model, 100% of the credit goes back to email. Even though there was 3 other touch points, 3 other channels that drove that traffic, 100% of it goes to email. So that's the kind of the last click model. And then it's actually technically last click non-direct, meaning if direct kind of falls as the last technical channel before the conversion happens, the channel right before it gets credit. So in that case, they come from display, then they come to social, and then they come back through paid search, and then they come direct, like they type in the address, or like we talked about, like all these dark social, they come through and Google doesn't know the source of traffic, they come direct. Paid search is actually going to get credit for that. So they'll get 100% of the credit. So that's the last click model. That's the model that we're all used to, and that's what Universal Analytics used. So Google's introduced a new data model, which is data-driven. And data-driven uses machine learning to kind of understand the patterns of users and different channels that drove them and how those channels may have influenced the conversion. So in that model, instead of email getting 100% of the credit, in that first example, paid search will get a little credit, social will get a little credit, display might get a little credit, right? So it's going to credit it based on the contribution of those channels to that conversion. And the thing that I learned last week is that in the standard data-driven is on by default. That's kind of what drives, that's the model that's on by default. However, it only is used there's one report called conversions. It's only used in the conversions report, not in the traffic acquisition report, which we'll show you in a few minutes. But the traffic acquisition report still uses last click, which is interesting, right? So there is a big kind of buzz around data-driven, but it just isn't showing up as predominantly inside the reports as much as I thought it was. So it's not really going to impact how you're looking at data as much right now.
Okay. All right. Now event. So on events, events in GA4 are not the same as event tracking in UA. In GA4, all data is logged as an event. So over here on the right, we have a couple of examples of different types of events.
Yeah, in Universal Analytics, an event was something you had to set up. And you still have to set it up in GA4 for certain things, but events were associated with a category, an action, and a label. And so those are the 3 buckets you could associate with an event. So an event could be somebody filled out a form, and you can put in a category as form, and the action was submitted, and label could be the name of the form, something like that. So it's very controlled, and you couldn't really do much more than that. You could kind of stuff things in the different fields. So events right now are actually much more open, and every action that's taken on the site could be an event that you pass over. Some of these things are tracked automatically. You could see in here like page view, user engagement, session start, first visit, scroll, even all those things are events that get tracked automatically. And then you can build and push your own events. Like here we have free sign up. That's like when someone signs up on SparkToro for a free sign up. We track, that gets tracked as an event, and so you can track any different engagement or actions that people are taking on the site as an event, and then you can associate different parameters against those events as well to kind of enrich what kind of an event it was, but that's much more open-ended in terms of how you can associate data to it.
Okay. All right. Next one. No goals, just conversions. So conversions can only be set against an event.
Yeah, so in old GA, we had much more flexibility in how goals could get set up. You could actually go in the interface and you can create goals based on page views or based on timing and like all this different stuff. It was very rich in how you can set up goals. In GA4, a goal, or there's no more goals, it's just conversions. And a conversion can only be assigned to an event. So you have to have an event pushed into GA4. There is a way to customize it inside the interface, which I don't totally recommend, but you can, as long as the event's there, you can toggle it on and off as a conversion. So it's easier to kind of turn it on and off, but you have to have the event accessible in order to be able to turn it on as a conversion.
Okay. Okay. And now collections. So this is going to be a new way to organize reports. And they're supposed to be customizable to your business objectives like lead gen, e-com, brand awareness, and so on.
Yeah, so in the interface in old GA, we couldn't control anything, right? We just kind of had all these reports available, and even if your business didn't have anything to do with those, you don't care about those reports, you just kind of had what you had. Now, when you go to set up a new GA4 property, you get this options, these drop down that says, are you trying to generate leads? Are you trying to sell online? Are you trying to raise brand awareness? And if you tick on these boxes, it'll create kind of collections built into GA4 for you to give you a starting point of the reports. But that's just a starting point. You could actually delete all your collections and all your reports. You can edit them. You can customize them. So that's one of the big kind of benefits of GA4 is it's much more flexible in the data that you end up or how you end up showing the data or the reports you show for your business, and you kind of hone it in on the type of business you have.
Okay. And then I think we have several more terms to get through here. So I kind of want to, I know there are a lot of questions in the chat, but I want to keep us on task here. So we'll try to get to questions at the end.
Yep.
We have another couple other sections to get through and some more terms to get through first. So, all right. Oh, great. That was the last term. So one thing we wanted to get through to talk about here was the black and white rules, right? The things that we did in Universal Analytics that we can no longer do in GA4. So we have several things to walk through here. I'm going to go through the slides, but I will let Steve take it away from here. Okay. The first thing we have UTMs.
Yeah. So UTM parameters, if you're not familiar, right, there's UTM source, medium, campaign, they're highlighted at the bottom there. Those are the things that tell Google where the traffic is coming from and how to associate it to a channel effectively inside GA. And in old GA, you can control this. You can kind of create custom channel groups and define how things flow into there. The default channel groups that we get in GA4, you can't actually customize the defaults. Those are what they are. You have kind of one groupings of those. We do have more of those. Things like organic shopping, paid video, organic video. Those are all new, which is great. But you can't actually customize those defaults. You can create a new channel group, custom channel group, and you can build into those, but the defaults are the defaults. And so if you want your traffic to fall into these defaults, they have to follow certain rules. And so for as some couple examples here, this is kind of pulled right out of the Google Analytics documentation, where if you want your traffic to fall into email, the email category or channel, the source, UTM source or medium has to contain the word email or one variation of those. If it has anything else, it's going to fall into unassigned or another channel. So you want to be really careful with how you set up UTM parameters to make sure they're falling in the buckets that you want them to.
Cool. And you have a UTM builder, right, that I'm going to share here.
Yep.
Dropping it in the chat, and then I'll drop it here in the ticker.
Yeah. Yeah, and the UTM builder is built it for GA4 specifically. So you basically pick a channel, and then it'll tell you what rules you have to apply to fall into those default channel groups.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm seeing some chatter about Apple, iOS, and some changes there with UTMs. And yes, it's specific to certain instances, but yes, Apple's starting to make some changes now too, where UTMs are going to start having less of an impact as well, because Apple's stripping those out too. So yeah, it's an ever changing world of how we're going to track things. So
yeah. Okay. All right. Next one. No more views or segments, mostly.
Yep.
You also
We
cannot
just lost
save.
it. Sorry.
Ooh.
We just lost the view.
Oh, what the heck? You know what I did wrong? Ugh, I stopped sharing the wrong thing. Sorry. Okay. There we go. So it's next thing we have is no more views or segments, mostly, right? So you can't save filters either, but you can build comparisons. What's this?
Yeah, so everybody loved views. Like views were great. Basically, a view is a filtered down view of your property. So your property is like your main website or your property of what you're tracking, and then you could subset and create these filtered views. So those are no longer available. And the nice thing about what used to be is you could apply that to the entire data set and all the reports and everything else. Now you can't do that. You actually have to, on every report, for the most part, create a new filter. And you can save those filters. You can save the report with the filter assigned to it and kind of create that, but you can't do it property wide. So it's kind of a pain, because if you have a lot of reports that you need to filter down on or kind of create new things, it can be a little cumbersome. So that's a little tricky. And then segments don't exist anymore in the main reporting set. You can use those in explorations, which is kind of like the custom reporting area. But in the standard reporting area, you can't create segments. You can create comparisons, you can add filters, but they can't be saved for future use. So that's kind of a pain point as well. But that's kind of the reality right now. So you kind of have to work with it inside of that.
Okay. All right. So on reports can be customized and saved.
Yeah. So this is the good news, right? So you can create new reports with different metrics and dimensions, and you can add filters to them, and you can kind of create different types of reporting and then save those. So you can either customize the ones that already exist and change those up, or you can actually create new ones. So that's the nice benefit of the reporting user interface. We have more flexibility there. So that's pretty nice.
I do want to call out some advice Rand gave in the chat. He says, if you were using UTMs and still need that type of tracking, my advice would be to use actual URLs to track, which is a pain in the butt, and you'll need to canonicalize for SEO. Okay. And then, all right. So now we have kind of quite a bit of demo to get through. And then I think we can also kind of fold in people's questions here. So our typical marketing use cases, we know everyone has different needs, but we think these are some of the really common ones. So the first one, I think this is pretty kind of basic, right? But so we need to know, understanding traffic performance.
Yes, and I can't share.
Oh,
It's
if
turned
I
off.
stop sharing, can you share?
Oh, there we go. I can.
Okay.
Okay, so let's get into GA4 a little bit. Hopefully most of you have seen this already, or at least kind of jumped in there, maybe quickly jumped out. But this is the standard interface. We have kind of the main reporting section. This is probably where you're going to spend most of your time under the reports. There's exploration, as I mentioned. This is where you can customize reports, but really reports is probably where you spend most of your time. So inside of here, as I mentioned before, we have the collections, right? So these are the collections. So acquisitions, a collection, engagement, and monetization are all collections. You may see something a little differently if you just recently set up your GA, you may see different reports in here and different collections depending on what you may have selected. If you've had GA4 set up for a while, you probably have all these same options here. But like for a business like SparkToro, they don't have things like e-com purchases or in-app purchases or publisher ads. They don't have all these things. So it's not as necessary to have kind of all these collections and reports available. And that's where you can go and edit and delete and things like that. So, but just kind of an overview of it. But as we get into some of the kind of more critical places you might be spending time, one is traffic acquisition. So this is most similar to your channel reporting, your channel reports in GA4. So we have, you've got up here, you can add your comparisons. So if you wanted to compare different types of data, like maybe by device category, so you can do mobile or desktop, you can add filters here, change dates, all that kind of thing. And then down here is where you start getting into your breakdown. So you've got your default channel groups. So this is things like direct or organic search, referral, things like that. And then you can also toggle to your different types of traffic as well. So if you want to look at things by source medium instead of by channel, so this kind of lines up to, as we were talking about UTM parameters, this lines up to UTM parameters, or if you're not using those or came through organically, you kind of see the source and the medium of that traffic. So you can toggle between those things. You can even get down to campaign level if you're using campaigns. So it is kind of nice because you can just jump between the different types of dimensions that you want to see, which is a little easier than it was before, but that's pretty handy. So that's pretty nice. And then these are some of the metrics that we were talking about, our users, our sessions, and this is where you start to see all the engaged sessions and average engagement time, thing like that. So yeah, this is probably where you spend a lot of time. It's the most similar to old channel report in terms of tracking where traffic's coming from and what they're doing. Are they engaging? Are they converting with your site? If you do e-commerce or tracking revenue, are they? Where is that? How's that those channels impacting revenue?
What's that triangle at the top where it says? I think Andrew Novak called it out. The little red caution triangle. He has rage building against it. What is that about?
So there's two different pieces here. One is sampling. So sampling happens when there's too much data for Google to process, and so it will do a smaller set of sampled of the data. So you have a smaller sample set. We have 100% in this case. You may see when you're running reports, you only have like 90% or sometimes as low as 10%. It depends on how much data it's trying to process. So that's one thing to pay attention to, is the sampling. Here, the thresholding is if you connect to Google Signals. And Google Signals is something new that Google introduced where it's trying to stitch together data that it doesn't know based on a user's cookies that have been assigned to the site. So for instance, if you're logged in to a Google account and you're browsing the web on Chrome, Google knows who you are, right? And you go to a site, it can use the fact that you're logged in to identify who you are and that you are that individual user and you've come to this website and pass that data into GA4. And so if you have Google Signals turned on, thresholding will come into play when Google thinks that there's not enough data in your, or the data threshold hasn't been met. So it's going to limit the amount of data in there because you might be able to identify an individual user because there's not enough data to kind of anonymize all of it. It's kind of this very kind of obtuse way to report out because it can definitely impact the data that's coming through. So if you have Google Signals turned on, I first off don't recommend doing it unless there's a reason to do it. And one of the reasons to do it is if you're running Google ads and you want to do remarketing, you have to have it turned on. And so if you have it turned on, that's a reason. Sorry, we're kind of getting pretty technical here. If you do have it turned on, there you can change a setting in Google Analytics or in GA4 here to keep the thresholding from happening. And that's underneath, where is it? Reporting identity. So under reporting identity, you can change this to device-based. And if you change this device base, your thresholding will go away because it's going to stop using Google Signals in your reporting. And so if you're using Google, I don't want to go too deep into this because it's going really technical, but that's just kind of the thoughts around that. So that's where thresholding comes from.
Oh, okay. And then there's a question here that I think I've seen a couple people ask, but it's related to traffic. How do you see the traffic how do you check it by week, day, or month?
You can't in this interface. So we don't have that, that's those nice little buttons that we used to have to say day, week, month, and expand this out. This is what we get. If you want to get more specific that way, you can actually go into the exploration reporting, which is where you can create custom reports. And inside here, you can break it down a little more granularly that way. But in the standard reports, you can't.
Oh, so if you wanted to just see by day, week, or month, you should make your own custom report?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, in the expiration. Now you can obviously change the date range, right? But it's always going to show in these reports, it's showing by day. So if I expand this out, let's do the last, 90 days, right? It's still going to show, this broke down by week. So this starts to get by week, but you can't toggle like you used to be able to change out the reporting that way.
Huh. Okay. I think we have another use case here on content performance. So can you help us understand content performance here?
Yeah, so this one's super interesting when we start talking about if you have content in your site, you've got a blog, and you do kind of content marketing type stuff. The landing page report can be really handy. So landing page report, similar to the old landing page report, where this is effectively how people are coming into your site, and what page they're landing on, and then what's happening after that. So you can understand how that page is performing, and is it a kind of a traffic driver. And so another way to filter down on here, so if we wanted to kind of check and see, just look at the blog and what kind of traffic the blog is getting. You can do a quick filter on this, which is nice. Since you don't have to come, the filtering here gets a little tricky, but you can basically just filter down here. Now we can see all of my blog traffic, and then you've got it's really scrolling. Let me change my. Yep. Okay. So if you scroll over, not only will we see our sessions and users, we start to see engagement time, but also conversions as well. So you can see if someone came to your site through a particular piece of content, what did they do, and did they actually convert? And if you track revenue, you can also see the revenue associated to that as well.
Okay. And I've seen a question here a couple times now, I think. Chase asks, should Google Signals be enabled or no?
I would argue, unless you have a compelling reason to do it, I would keep it off. Like the two compelling reasons could be you're running Google ads and you want to do retargeting, you have to turn it on then. Or some of the demographic data like gender and age will not come over unless you have Google Signals turned on. So if that's something you're used to reporting on and information that you like to use, then you have to have Google Signals turned on in order for that data to come through. But if you don't need that, I would recommend keeping it off as long as you can, or never, because I have seen instances where data just is completely gone. Like we could be looking at this report right here, and we're seeing the number of sessions, by blog post or something total is 46,000. If you have Google Signals turned on, or in case like I didn't check, you guys may already have it turned on. But if it is, you may have actually had 55,000 sessions, not 46,000. And Google's suppressing the data that it's showing here because there's thresholding applied. So you'll miss more data potentially if Google Signals is turned on, which is kind of ironic because the whole point of having Google Signals is to try to like enrich your data, but in fact, it kind of can suppress it in certain instances.
Great.
Yeah.
Why? Okay. So we have 16 minutes left. There have been a ton of questions in the chat. I've kind of been trying to like consolidate in my head a little bit. So if y'all could help me, drop your questions in the Q&A, just because there are so many. Usually we can man this in the chat, but it's hard this time. So drop your questions in the Q&A, but also maybe take a moment to scroll through the questions in Q&A and upvote the questions that you would like to see prioritized, just so we can start going through that. And then Steve, I want to, if you could stop sharing your screen for a moment.
Yep,
I have a couple other slides I want to show. So folks, go through the Q&A tab and scroll through some of the questions, upvote what you want answered, and also feel free to ask your own questions. And then I'm going to show a couple last resources here.
I did, while you're doing that, I did see people are saying they don't have library. You have to have editor access or above in order to see the library option. If you just have read only or viewer, you're not going to see the library. And the library is where you can go to change out and customize your reports. We didn't get into the customization. We just don't have time today, but you can go and edit these reports. So if you don't see library or you don't see the little pencil in the top right-hand corner of your reports, you probably don't have the right access.
Okay, this was someone, I think it was Chris who said in the chat something about how we should be able to use Looker for some of this. And I know you have a Looker studio set up, so I wanted to show folks this as a resource. And then we also have a link to this, I think.
Yeah, so the Looker, this report is, I built this to try to help understand your association between your channels and your source medium. One of the biggest things that people run into when they first come in is, like we were talking about, your UTM parameters have to match up to your channel groups. And if they don't, a ton of stuff's going to fall into unassigned. And instead of working in the GA4 interface to kind of figure it out, I built this Looker Studio report. You can, it's free, you can access it. There's no gateway or anything, just get into it. And basically you just go add your property to it. It'll connect to your property and you'll be able to see your channels and your sources, your source mediums very clearly to say, all right, I've got all this stuff in unassigned. You can filter it on just to unassigned. And now you've got all this stuff showing in there. Now you'll know how to adjust your UTM parameters to figure out how to get them into the channels they should be. There's also a link in the Looker Studio to bring you to that UTM builder as well. So hopefully that's helpful for folks as they're trying to, like, this is like make sure my data is clean type of report.
Cool. This is awesome. Thank you. Cool. And then I think we have a couple other things. Cool. This is the UTM builder. This is what we talked about earlier. I will also, yeah. So that's, you basically pick a channel and then you have the rules specified on there. And I'm going to plug my other life, which is Promo Prep. So that's on promoprep.com. It's kind of a marketing calendar. So check that out too. But basically that's on there. So that allows you to kind of select your channel and then assign the rules. It'll even pull in the actual rule that Google sets for it. So you know exactly how to set up your parameters. Cool. And then I think, okay. I think we'll stop there and I'll go through the Q&A. All right. Cool. Thank you, friends. Okay. So I'm going to sort the questions by most upvoted. All right. So Lindsay asks, is there a resource to learn how to build these reports? I'm struggling to create.
Yes, I did another webinar that covers this specifically. So we can share that link out as well. I did it back in February, so things have changed, but not much actually, not in that piece of it. So definitely check that out. It goes through exactly how to customize and update and create your reports and save them and change your library settings and everything else. So you should have all that information there.
Is this your WTF Google?
That's the one.
GA4. Yep. Okay, that's the one.
That is it. Yep.
All right. So I'm going to drop the link here. Okay. The ticker and in the chat. Cool. So this is a really good webinar. I went through this one. I'm going to have to rewatch it too, but there are a lot, you go straight into demos and it's basically an hour-long demo of GA4. So it's going to be super helpful. And friends, we wanted this presentation to complement Steve's past webinars. So that way you can consume all of this and it's all kind of just complementary and useful in their own formats. Okay. Cool. Someone has said, where can we get example reports or templates? So Tisha, that's covered in that crowdcast. So I'll just drop that link here too.
I'll jump in. There's a question about BigQuery because I'll let a couple come up a couple times. So you can push all your data into BigQuery if you have a reason to do it, right? If you want to create reports in some other BI tool out there and you want to connect it to other data sources and everything else, you can use BigQuery. It's more the raw data. It's not going to be aggregated like the API is and things like that. So you can push it into BigQuery and then do whatever you want with it. If you are thinking about using BigQuery, it's relatively cheap to store the data. I think it's like $5 per 5 terabytes or something. So it's cheap to store. Where the costs come in is when you start doing queries against them. So you kind of have to know it's more technical. You got to use SQL for the most part. But if you're thinking about that and you want BigQuery connection, do it now, because you can't do historical. So it only starts gathering data the moment you put it in, it won't go back in time. So if you're thinking about BigQuery, get it set up now.
Cool. What else here? Let's see. ST asks, when we migrate to GA4, what should we pay attention to? I guess, is there anything in particular that people need to be most aware of or make sure about?
Yeah, I would pay attention to that source medium and your channel groupings in particular. Make sure that those are coming through cleanly. You can also just do some comparisons against your sessions and page views are probably the two things to pay attention to between the old systems. They're not going to match exactly. Don't expect them to, but as long as they're probably within 5% or so, you're probably good. If they're too much farther out there, you might have mistracking either in old GA or in GA4, don't know which, but that's a couple things to pay attention to as you switch over.
Cool. Let's see. Kurt asks, how can we see individual page performance, like page views versus about? Yeah,
so that's, let me share again. That's going to happen here in the pages and screens. So it's by default starts off with page titles, or sorry, actually it should. Usually starts out with page titles, right? So this is the first thing that pops up. And so you can toggle down to page path, which is effectively your URL. And then you can start to break this down by whatever your type of page is. So that's the quickest way to get there. You get views, you get your users, that type of thing. So kind of the similar metrics we're used to in old GA. If you happen to do, you can even assign, you have to set this up in like a Google Tag Manager or something to push it over, but you could assign pages to a content group. So that maybe you have a group that's your articles and blogs. Maybe you have a group that's like your marketing pages. Maybe there's a group that's e-commerce. I don't know, whatever it is. You can assign a category to your pages as well. And then you can break things down by content group. So nothing's set up here, but that's another way to do that. Or you can you could use filters. The filters are not very useful when you're doing the page breakdown, because you can't do like a contains all of this stuff. You have to actually tick off every page you want to see in this report. So that becomes a little cumbersome, but yeah, that's how you get to the pages reports.
Okay, thank you. And Shannon asks, how can we drill down into traffic from organic social?
Yeah, so in traffic acquisition, we can see organic social here. Okay, so there's two ways to do this. You can't do drill downs where you click into it and now all of a sudden see it. So what you would do here is add source medium. So I'm sorry, I'm jumping. You click the little plus button. This allows you to do a secondary dimension, so a side-by-side dimension. So I can click here and type in source and then select session source medium. And now this lines up all my channels with my source medium. And if I only want to see organic social, I can type out organic social here. right? And then now I should, I just see my organic social. So now I can see that lined up to where that's coming from. So that's one way to do that. You also could add a filter just using organic social as your channel. But this is one way it's kind of nice. You can see it kind of side by side there.
Cool. All right. Stephanie asks, can you track data history from the old GA now since the old GA is gone?
You can't. So you'll have historical data. You'll still be able to get into old GA for another year till July of 2024. So all that, the interface will be available, just no more data is going to get pushed to it. So you can still access it, but there's no way to merge the data and kind of do a report inside GA4. Now, you can inside like a Looker Studio or some other tool, you can do that, but you have to, for now, or if you want historical, you will have to export the old GA data, store it someplace, and then connect it, Looker Studio to that, and then kind of connect it again to GA4. It's a process. So there's some tools out there that help with the process, but it's not easy. So unfortunately, fortunately, we do still kind of have a year to kind of figure it out, but it will come the day where it's just no longer going to be available in the interface.
Cool. Okay, we have 4 minutes left. Can you go a little bit over, or do you have a hard stop?
I can. Yep.
Okay, so friends, we'll stay a little bit longer. Maybe we'll do an extra 5 minutes. I want to be respectful of Steve's time.
I'm good. Whatever.
And more questions. Okay, so let's see. I lost my place. All right. Somebody asked about. I think Susan asked, can we track traffic to particular pages? Like, let's say a blog section.
Yeah, so you can in your pages and screens report. This is, sorry, was it track traffic or the source of traffic? Just traffic?
She said traffic.
Yeah, okay. So that would be this page report. I think I touched on this a little bit. You would have to set up through something like a Google Tag Manager or some way to tell Google Analytics what category it should fall into. But if you have that set up, it's an easier way to break your groupings of pages down. Otherwise, if you have something that delineates what type of page it is, so in this case, we have product as a page, so I can just filter on product and I'll see all my product pages here. Or like I showed before, we can just go see blog, something like that. So there are ways to get at that if you're not using content groups, but that's how you'd see all your page performance.
All right, Chase asks, can we walk through how to properly create a conversion event in GA4?
So setting up an event is, well, there's two ways to do it. The better way to do it is using a tool like Google Tag Manager. And Google Tag Manager, if you have that set up to push all your data into GA4 from your website, it basically, that's ideal because you can control the events that are coming in. GA4 does have this way to create events. You can do this. I would use caution because I've run into cases where someone has created an event inside the interface here, and then it's duplicating an event that's pushing from like a Google Tag Manager, or it's named a little differently, so it's like offset. So there's just some weird nuance that can happen if you create an event here. And there's not enough time to go through how to do that, but you can create an event here. And if you did, and you see that event, and or if you already have the event, creating a conversion off there is just as simple as clicking the toggle here. So once you have the event here, you tick the box, and all of a sudden going forward, it'll start tracking it as a conversion. So it'll show up in your reports as a conversion. But you have to have the event first. So that's key.
Okay. All right, more questions. David asks, how do I quickly check campaign performance, traffic, conversions, etc.?
So inside the traffic acquisition report, there is a campaign dropdown. So you can do session campaign, and depending, there is some campaign data coming in here. So if you have UTM campaigns set up, or it's getting pushed over from like Google Ads or whatever, as long as you have campaign data getting fed into to your site that GA4 is picking up on, you'd be able to then use your session campaign and create this as a report, or toggle to this. You could then save this as a specific report if you wanted to customize it. You can customize it and then like only include, say, if we were to remove all of these and just include campaign, then you'd have a report you could save, and then you could go to that report each time instead of having to toggle back and forth on it. But either way, whatever suits your needs, you can get to that campaign information that way.
Okay. All right, and folks can still see us, right? We are still live.
I was literally jumping in to double check that.
Yeah, I'm like,
Yep, everybody's still here. All right, you just get the little pop up that like asks how the webinar was.
Yeah.
Someone mentioned annotations. That's frustrating. There's no annotations.
Wait, we
love that
that.
feature. Yeah, I mean, that's a big gap, right? I don't have a good answer for it. Someone came up with a clever Looker Studio way to do it, where you have to put it in Google Sheets, and then if you're using Looker Studio, it'll kind of connect to that. But it's just not as quick and easy as just typing it right there inside the interface. So, yep, sorry, it's another check on the box of frustration.
I think our favorite feature.
Yeah,
that was one of the best ones. I think we saw I think it was Melissa who noted that the Google Analytics 4 slogan is, "Why would they do that?"
Yes, it is like it's just, hopefully they have made some pushes here in the last couple of months. Let's hope they keep it up. But
let's hope so. I wasn't sure if we maybe had time, Steve, but do you have thoughts on alternatives?
I do. I have not personally used many of those, so I can't speak to them specifically, but the ones I have tried out, I have found to be useful, depending, right? So, and again, like I can't go that deep on it, but if you're in a brand new space and you're just like, you have to pick and you're not crazy about what you're learning and seeing in GA4, definitely maybe set up another tool and run it in parallel, and you can choose, right? Like at one point, if you're feeling like you're just not getting what you need out of GA4, get after it with another tool. So absolutely, that's an option. I know there's some good tools out there that are free too, up to a certain point, right? But I think that's the big draw at Google Analytics is it is free so I think that's why people are sticking to it. It's kind of what they're used to. But again, like now we're not used to it anymore. So it could be a time for you to switch over. It really depends on your business needs.
Yeah. I don't mean to go all conspiracy theory. Do you have a theory, Steve, on why Google Analytics is free?
Well, they gather a lot of data, don't they? Right? Like look at the entire web. Millions and millions and millions of websites use Google Analytics. And so Google's all about data. They've got unlimited amounts of understanding about how the web functions and how, you name it, Google can learn about it in Google Analytics. So yeah, that's absolutely a big benefit to them. And obviously their ads program, like that enriches the ads data and helps fuel how decisions are made inside of Google Ads too. So there's dual benefit for sure, multiple benefit.
Yeah, I mean, my sense
we are the product.
Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
I mean, my sense is that I could be wrong about this, but it feels to me like GA4 is even more. This has been true throughout Google Analytics history, but even more advertising centric than past versions, right? That the ways that we want to track and measure and do all the organic things and annotations and sort of like, hey, let's help content marketers, let's help SEOs. It's not that that's gone, but it feels like if you're in the ads business, this is in some ways a step up, and if you're not, maybe not so much.
Yeah. I mean, I think there is that focus, even the data-driven piece, the data-driven attribution, people have said that it's kind of slants towards paid, Google channels. I don't know. I can't speak to that, but there are those kind of theories running around there. It's, I don't know. Google always has their best interests at heart. So, that's what they're after, I think.
Is your personal sense that it is easier to track sort of advertising, digital advertising inside GA4, or at least that's more front and center? Or is that just more of a conspiracy theory? No, it's just as easy or just as difficult to track as it was previously.
I haven't gotten that sense, really.
Okay.
There's certain reports in there that, I don't know, there's a whole section in old GA with, all the different ads reporting, and you can see clicks and costs and impressions and all that stuff. So I don't totally get that sense that it's like heavily pushed that way or slanted that way.
Great. Okay. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Cool.
Cool. Well, I think we got to wrap, but I want to call out, Steve has a very generous offer.
Oh, yes.
Steve is offering up a chance to win a free private GA4 workshop for your team. Wow. So this is pretty cool.
Yeah. So I do this a lot, right? Doing workshops. Private workshops are really helpful because you can ask all these questions and we can get into it, and kind of like this, usually with your GA up. So certainly if you're wanting to do that, just got to sign up for my newsletter, and which I send out like maybe once a year. So you're not going to get pounded with it in your inbox, but mostly it's just, hey, if you want to do that, let me know. I'll pick someone randomly by, I think, Monday, I said, and we can connect on that. So.
Fantastic. That is a very kind and generous offer. Steve, there was one more request in the chat, and Amanda, you probably saw this too, where folks said, hey, is there a way to like take a summary of the Q&A and the questions in the chat, and maybe get Steve to give, short answers to those, and we could put that into a post or something.
Yeah, let's do it.
Folks could.
I love that.
Yeah.
That's a good idea.
Either on your site or Steve, of course, we're happy to host on SparkToro.
Yeah.
But I think there's just such a huge number of questions that people have had. And I believe we do get to save the chat, right, Amanda?
Yeah, the chat will be here. So when people watch the replay, they can also look at the chat in real time. And then once this goes on YouTube, probably next week, I'll make sure to add the chapter markers that have like the questions where I read them out and Steve's answers. So I think we'll start there with the blog post for the Q&A, and then we can embed stuff as needed. I think this will be super helpful.
That would be amazing. Yeah, I think the wrap up post is the perfect place to do that.
Yeah.
Steve, I just want to say, like, truly, your generosity, not only in this webinar, but on social and in email with the dark social research that we did together, has just been wonderful to see. I am consistently amazed at the generosity of the digital marketing universe, and you are front and center for me in that in that world lately. So
thank you. That means a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, please let us know. Please let us know how we can return the favor. I hope that lots of business comes your way. It absolutely should. You're a genius on all this stuff, and just so kind and helpful. Amanda, also, I sing your praises every day, but holy moly, putting this together, your marketing for this webinar, bringing all these people together, getting all this value to folks, just incredible. So thank you as well.
Thank you. And Steve, thank you so much for this. Thank you to everyone who joined. Thank you, Rand. I haven't seen you in a while, so this is also nice to see you.
I'm going to be down in LA in August, so we'll try and come by.
Yeah, that'll be nice.
All right. Take care, friends. Thank you, Steve.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.